All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, I want to welcome you to tonight's webinar. My name is Alan Kearns, and welcome our partnership with York University. I'm really glad to have you here tonight, and our partnership, our friends with York University, and part of our CareerClass series. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but York has partnered with CareerJoy, and we're the exclusive provider of career coaching services to alumni across Canada for you. And as part of our partnership, we offer our CareerClass series, and this is the third part of that series. And leadership starts with you. And so I'm going to be sharing with you some of my perspectives around leadership and some of the changes that we're seeing and in the world of work, and why it's important to this concept of leadership in general, and both leading your career, but also as an emerging leader, and elements around leadership, or really, as I've subtitled tonight, why I should follow you. Why should I follow you, rather? So I'm going to be sharing with you, this whole concept of leadership, and this is the fundamental, theme of tonight. That really leadership starts with you. As you learn how to manage and lead yourself more effectively, as you learn how to communicate more effectively, as you learn how to manage resilience and change, as you learn how to maintain an optimistic but a practical perspective, all of those things, you'll find that it really more people want to follow you, and you'll be able to do some interesting things in your life as a result of that. And a little bit about my background. I'm the head coach and founder of CareerJoy, and we're a national career and leadership coaching company. So I myself have made a career change, but also have been working with leaders over the last 15 plus years, dealing with both leadership decisions, recruitment decisions, hiring decisions, firing decisions, in development decisions. And we also work with organizations. So we have a number of corporate clients that we work with, including people like Ottawa Senators, Deloitte, Thrifty, Subaru, Scouts Canada, and all of these organizations are really fundamentally, businesses are just really people leading other people. I mean, when you get down to it, there's specific differences in each business, but really at the end of the day, people work for people, people are led by people, people follow people. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, some of the principles around leadership, some of the changes that are going on in the world of work, and why recognizing how to be a more effective leader has never been more important and never more urgent, as well as some research in Canada around leadership, and some recent research around the issues around leadership and the important elements of leadership, and then some some ideas to help you be a more effective leader. So that's where we're going to be going tonight. Just a couple of quick technical things as we start. You'll notice on your dashboard, you'll notice that you have a hands up. Can you just give me a hands up to make sure that you can see my screen? I just want you to take a minute to give me a hands up to make sure you can see the screen. Okay, great, because I've had situations where I'm fervently sharing ideas, and people say, is there pictures there? The other thing is, can you take a minute to introduce yourself? You'll see in the question box, you can take a minute there to introduce yourself. So can you take a minute to introduce yourself and where you're calling from tonight, where you're joining us from tonight, rather, on the webinar? Just take a minute to do that. Love to see how far and wide we go. I know we've had people in our York CareerClass series all the way from Europe to Vancouver to Toronto. So just take a minute to introduce yourself. I'm the only one who can see that, by the way. So that's the other advantage. If you have specific questions or comments that you have tonight, then that's just also another way to make this interactivity. I mean, one of the things I really believe is leadership is a conversation, and part of what we want to have tonight is a conversation around leadership. And so just take a minute to introduce yourself. And I'm seeing we got people here tonight from Timmins, Ontario, from Richmond Hill, from Wasaga Beach, from Toronto, from all the way from Vaughan, Toronto. A lot of people from Toronto. Okay, that's great. No surprise. Oh, we got somebody from Markham, Montreal. Terrific. From another person from Concord, all the way to Concord. Great. Well, we got a good mix of people here tonight, which is great. Also, feel free as we go along tonight, you have specific questions or comments. That's another way that you'll participate in tonight's webinar. Also, if you are, how many of you, put up your hands, are on Twitter? Those of you that are active on Twitter. Okay, a number of you are. Feel free to tweet or tweet out to your followers as we're going through this journey tonight. Any comments or ideas that you might find your followers might find helpful. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll give you my super secret email address. And if you look for me on LinkedIn, you'll find that if you want to connect with me there, one of the key things is your network is how wide and diverse your network is. And you can join mine. I've almost got 5,500 plus people I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and you get access to that if you connect with me. So I'll just send that out to you, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Great. So you probably have questions tonight. That's part of the reason you're here is, what is the right career situation? What does it mean to be an effective leader? What's changing in leadership? And so I really look at this as a conversation around this. And, as I thought about leadership and thinking about this whole topic, I thought about this concept of Eatons and Rim. And I think about two great examples of companies that were really innovative in their category. In fact, if you think of Eaton's catalog, it was the original social media. You would get your pages, you would favorite your page, you would pass it around to your friends and family, you would like it, and then you would make some comments about it, and then you would put your order in, and it would magically arrive at your doorstep. That was the Eatons catalog. What is Eatons today? Eatons is no longer around. It's a dead brand. Why is that? Is it because people have stopped shopping? Is it because the world has changed? Well, the world has changed, but people have never shopped more. But Eatons, who at one point was a dominating figure in Canada in the retail space, is no longer here. Why? Leadership. BlackBerry Rim, another example, a great Canadian brand, really the originator of the smartphone and the smart experience on a phone, and led the category really till about 2.5 years ago. And now, the jury's still out. I don't think they're going to disappear, but they're at best running third. Another example of an organization that really was a leader in its category and lost focus. And why? Was it because people are spending less money on smartphones? No, not at all. It was really because they weren't really smart. And so, in today's world, it's about being smart. And there's a lot of reason to be scary. And you can sometimes think about this as scary versus smart. And so what's the difference between being smart about your decisions and versus making scary decisions? What's the difference between a smart leader and a leader that's scary to work for? And what's interesting is kind of the work we do on individuals. So we do a lot of career development in individuals. And one of the things I often hear is why do people are frustrated in work is because of they work for a leader they don't really respect. In fact, I got a call today from somebody saying, I work with the boss from hell and I want out. I like what I do, but I can't imagine working for this person. So, leadership has so many impacts, both, large scale and small scale. So you may say, well, Alan, I'm not RIM and I'm not Eatons. I'm not a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't necessarily have an MBA from Harvard. How does this relate to me? So I'll show you a very practical example of leadership starting at a very small scale. I speak and write speak at a lot of conferences across the country. I was in Vancouver, actually Victoria, at a conference, and I got picked up by this gentleman to take me to where I was speaking, and a really lovely guy, clean taxi, very efficient, very pleasant. I asked him a question about how his business was going and what he was up to, and he said, it's going pretty good. And I asked him about his day, what his day was going to be like. And he said, well, it kind of depends on the day, depends how lucky I am, depends on it just, we'll have to see how it goes. And he brought me to my destination, and I gave him a tip, and away I went. And then I contrast that with this gentleman who I was picked up in Halifax, ironically, the complete opposite end of Canada. And Mr. Land, the taxi driver, picked me up at the airport. And on the way to the hotel, he asked me, Alan, are you going to be needing a drive back to the airport? And I said, yeah, that would be great. And he said, when do you need a drive? And I said, I need to drive Friday morning. And he said, what time do you need it to pick you up at? And I said, I need to be picked up at 5:30. And I saw him open up his calendar, his schedule, and I saw him write my name in his schedule. And he said, oh, by the way, Alan, can I get your cell phone number? And I said, sure. And so he took my cell phone number. And this is the text I got from him 24 hours before he was to pick me up. So the day before I was to be picked up, this is the Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon, rather, at 12:56. I got a text from him saying that this is the taxi driver, and is there anything changed? And I'm looking forward to picking you up tomorrow morning. Now, what's interesting is when he did he did, by the way, pick me up on the next morning, and it, brought me to the airport. And I noticed, by the way, when he picked me up, I looked at his calendar. I happened to have it open on his desk or on his seat, and I noticed that he had 6 or 7 more flights booked to be people to be picked up that day. So who is leading here? Is this taxi guy leading? Who is the smart leader here? And so this applies whether you are are a Rim or an Eatons, or whether you want to be a Google or a running room or a Lululemon, And what's interesting is this, what I saw is a completely different example. One person was allowing the market and circumstances to drive him literally, and Lan was driving circumstances in the market, and he was controlling the things that were in his control, asking the right questions, looking for opportunity, use of technology, use of time management, strategy, all of these sorts of things he integrated into his little business, right? So take that and scale that, and now you have an Apple or a Google or a Rim at one point. Narrow it down, and you could use this. So this is applicable what I'm talking about today, whether you have a little small business and it's just you and your car, or whether you're running 3 or 4 or 500 people. So why is this important? Why is this concept so important? Well, I think it's really important because of a reset, that there's a fundamental restructuring going on in our economy. And, I work, as I mentioned, across sectors. So we have clients in multiple different sectors across the country, multiple different professions, multiple different professions. You know that we see in every single corporate client we work with just tremendous amount of change. You can look at the sports industry, and look at media, look at healthcare, look at the car business, look at not-for-profits, look at governments, look at Ontario government. Tremendous amount of change. And what this means is there's a tremendous opportunity for people to lead. There's a tremendous opportunity for you to take ownership, to find innovation, because with change comes all kinds of gaps, and also comes demand for leaders. And I love this statement, lead, and the definition, the etymology of it. The Old English means to cause to go with, to lead, to cause to go with, to go, to travel, to be in first place. And I think the action of leading. And so I think this concept of leading and the action of leading and to cause to go with. Now, why is this important? Well, you see fundamental change in our economy and our restructuring. You see globalization, India and China coming in, and they are essentially taking leadership positions in different sectors and different categories. You have 40 million university graduates coming into the marketplace. You're seeing, I just was on the CBC a couple of weeks ago about the Royal Bank and outsourcing, and just seeing where Canadian companies are going to be using people wherever they can in different ways, right? So again, one of the things you want to be thinking about as a leader, by the way, is this whole concept of are you getting some global experience? A really important thing that you want to be thinking about is if you're doing an MBA or you're working in an organization, can you work on a global project? Can you get involvement with global project? The same as the way we deal with teams of people. You're seeing a lot more use of staffing agencies and temporary labor and bringing people in on contract. Again, you saw that with the Royal Bank as just one example. And many companies use these. So again, how we use people, how we integrate people into our businesses is changing. So this is another way that's changing the world. Same with technology. The concept of the smartphone and the concept of a 24/7 world we live in, where we expect demands. And what this means is that you want to be thinking about how to lead in a virtual world. How do you lead virtual teams? How many of you, put up your hands, work in a virtual team? Put up your hand, those of you that work from a home office or virtual team, right? All right, so a number of you work from a home office. Again, so that's an example of technology, and also boundaries. You're seeing this with technology boundaries and leveraging of technology, and managing diverse and global environments, managing in an environment where you might be managing a team that's in the Philippines, and then managing a team that's in Australia, and managing a team that's in China, and managing a team that's in England, right? So again, knowing how to use technology, knowing how to work in a 24/7 type of world, but still keeping your head on. The other sort of change that's, another sort of change in leadership is the multi-generational workforce. So this example of retirement, where you're finding a lot more people staying in the workforce longer. And now literally we have four generations in the workforce. You have baby boomers that are staying in the workforce. You have Gen X's, Gen Ys, and millennials. And so again, how do you manage, motivate, and lead within that environment? The same thing with the way that people are being promoted. You're seeing this, and the concept of promotion, and it's not unusual to see a 45 or 30 38-year-old CEO of a company. That's not unusual these days. So again, the way people are being promoted is changing. Another change is displacement. So you're seeing new technology come in and displace old technology, and very quickly. A great example of that is the hybrid, the Prius. Where you have a new technology coming in, and innovation, and tremendous amount of innovation. And again, a lot of that comes from people that are leading you. The person actually who created the Prius, the Toyota hybrid program, is actually now leading the entire company. This is what that impact that person had on the company and his opportunity. So again, when you find places that can be innovative, you can make a tremendous impact in a very positive way in our planet, in this case green energy, and also for your own career. Another area you see leadership and is in competition, and I call this the mustard principle, that there's so much competition, even in a small category like mustard. So again, how does one stand out? How does one position themselves properly? How does one find the right strategy? Again, leadership. So leadership has tremendous impacts. It also impacts on people's quality work. I know as a recruiter, working in high functioning organizations, it was very difficult to recruit out of high functioning organizations. Really well led organizations were difficult to recruit from. Poor organizations were easy to recruit out of, actually. And this is because of these stats where people have more stress, and job tenure is changing, and all these types of things, right? And so what are some of the myths around leadership? Well, number one, there's a magic bullet. How many of you have taken or been part of a leadership assessment? Put up your hands, those of you that have done some sort of a leadership assessment, like what color are you, or some element of that. Now, again, I think leadership assessments have a place to play, but sometimes I think we've dumbed down that if we just tell you what color you are, or just some element of that you'll know how to be a better leader. You are far more interesting, far more complex than than that. And again, I think there are ways of doing this. By the way, there are other tools that we have that are more innovative and more creative. But I do think we have to be careful not to kind of narrow this down. If you just take a leadership test, you'll be a better leader. I think another myth around this is you'll have a lot of pressure. I think what I've seen is you will always have pressure. I mean, I feel that. I have pressure, but I have a lot less pressure when I'm leading well. You still have pressure. And when you take on a leadership role, you're going to have more pressure. But when you're leading more effectively, what I find happens is my pressure gets reduced and my stress level drops. And when I'm leading poorly, it raises, right? So stress can go up. Uh, Another myth around this is you should know how to lead. I knew this as a recruiter. We would take people that were doing well and we promote them or get them into situations where they're now a new situation. And tomorrow morning, actually, I'm happening going to scuba diving, and I wouldn't expect to sort of jump in the water and without the right equipment or rather the right training. But yet we promote many, many people into situations where they're not ready yet. They don't have the proper training. That we think that they're good at being a salesperson, so they'll be great at being a sales manager. We think they're good at leading an IT project, therefore they'll be a great CIO. Not necessarily. Another myth around leadership is it's lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top. What I find is smart leaders are not lonely. Smart leaders are not lonely. Smart leaders surround themselves with good advocates, good people like ourselves, executive coaches, and others that they bring in, good board of advisors. They do not isolate themselves. They do not that. If anyone says to you it's lonely at the top, they're not leading very effectively. They don't have a good team around them. In fact, actually, if you look at many research around in a great book called Good to Great, how many of you read the book Good to Great? Put up your hands, those of you who've read that as a leadership book. I'm going to give you some good leadership books tonight. Some of you may have. That's a really good book, Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's actually it's been out for over 10 years, but I still think it's a great book. And one of the interesting things they talked about is how many of these executives actually were still in their first marriages. So as an example, they are very good at building relationships on a long-term basis, including families. Another myth around leadership, it should be comfortable. You know what? I think the danger of being too comfortable. Why did RIM lose its position from number one? Um, um, Number one is because they were too comfortable, right? Too comfortable. Too comfortable. And so I think you have to be very careful. Great leaders figure out how to continually move their organization out of comfort. And I admire that. By the way, Google is a great example like that. I think of that, and so is Lululemon, and so is I think the Running Room here in Canada. That they're continually doing new things and trying new things. I think another myth around leadership is educational help. Now again, I'm not against education. Obviously, we're partnering with York, so we have a number of partnerships, including York, and I really believe the right education, the right time has never been more valuable. But we're just seeing a tremendous amount of different ideas around what is the right education, what are the right programs, and sometimes it's appropriate to take an MBA, sometimes it's not. You're seeing many examples now where companies are revisiting this whole concept of training and things like that. So that's a whole change. Another myth around leadership, it's complicated. I think it's complex. Another myth around leadership, that if you give people information, they'll make the right decisions. And again, if you look at Dr. William Bernstein's discussion around the Investor's Manifesto, that giving the right information doesn't always lead people, nor does fear. Fear is a very good short-term motivator, a terrible long-term motivator for leaders, by the way. Another myth around is I don't have time. I'm too busy. I can't really invest in myself as a leader. I can't do coaching. And I always put this, think about the 10-minute rule. Take 10 minutes a day to think about being a more effective leader. Read a blog. Go online. Just 10 minutes a day. And interesting enough, 10 minutes a day times 5 days a week is over a week of training a year in leadership. 10 minutes a day. Another myth around this is you'll find balance. I think what I think you want to be careful about is that idea of balance and more look for integration. I think being a leader can be quite challenging because you're balancing your own needs, your team's needs, all these demands you have around you, and I think you're going to be out of balance at times. Another myth around this, you should follow the rules. And again, I think rules have a place in work, but again, great leaders know how to not think alike. You ever say that great people think alike, great leaders think alike? No, they do not. They think differently. So all of these things, respond to this concept of dealing with change. And I love this concept of change because that's really what a great leader deals with, is change. And what's interesting is John Kotter from Harvard Business School, I love what he has to say there. That changing the behavior of people isn't the biggest challenge in healthcare. It is the most important challenge for businesses trying to compete in a turbulent world. What's the most important question for a leader? The most important question is not who, what, how, where, or when. It's why. If you want to understand how to motivate somebody, first of all, yourself, then I need, if I want to understand, I will ask you the question, why do you want to be a leader? Why do you want to lead that project? Why do you want to join that organization? Why do you want to get married to that person? Why do you want to lose weight? I would not ask you how, when, or where, by the way. I would start with why. And it's interesting, there's a great book, and maybe you've seen this, the TED Talk. It's Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and he does an excellent job. I think you can see it on a TED, or you can get his book on why. And he really explains this concept that when you understand the why, when you understand then you'll understand the very deepest root of motivation. And when you understand motivation, then the how and the what and the when and the where is really key. Until you understand why, you will not be able to help people with change, and you will not be able to lead them very effectively. Until you understand your own why for wanting to do something and where you want to go, you'll not do a very good job of it. What are some of the competitive threats to leaders? Well, number one, I think yourself. if I think of people that are held back, it's actually themselves, their beliefs, their frustrations, your environment, your peers. And I actually think you have to be very careful of the media. I think the media is incredibly more negative, and we're immersed with it and everywhere we go. And I think you have to be very careful of that. So there is a who in leader, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. And I want to come back to that. One of the things you have to really understand is you really have a clear sense of who you are and your style, and really honoring that style. And there's interesting. There's really 4 key leadership styles. There's the decisive style, which is little information, one course of action. That's a task-oriented leader. There's the flexible style, which is little information but many options. There's a hierarchical style with reams of data but one course of action. That's very much if you look at government organizations that are like that. And then there's the integrative style. So various data and groups of options involves creativity and inputs from many sources and many multiple courses of action. As a young leader, you will be in style 1. As a mature, strong leader, you'll move to style 4, the integrative. That's really where you should be aiming, is how do you get better at involving various groups of options and not be so linear in your thinking. The thing that you'll be held back if you're too linear. And but again, it's understanding your style, where you are now. So think about that now. If you look at those 4 styles, where are you now in this kind of this style? Which one would you say you are? So what are some of the research around this topic in Canada? So there's an interesting research by the Global Knowledge. It's a 2011 survey, so it's just about a year and a half old, so it's fairly recent. And it asks the question, what is the biggest challenge organizations expect to face in the coming years? So the top business challenges, number 1 today, were management leader capacity or capability. Number 2 were talent succession management, followed by recruitment, financial, competitive pressures, and business process improvement, then technology. So it's interesting how the number 1 issue was the top 3 were all related to people: recruitment, talent, and leadership development, followed by financial competitive pressures, business improvement. You see, I don't think Eaton's problem was financial competitive or business process environment. I don't think RIM's problem were financial competitive pressures or process environment. I think it was their ability to deal with number 1 and some of their challenges around that. Key question number 2, how might the roles and activities of the manager and leaders need to shift in order to meet these challenges? Here's what's interesting. 71% of senior managers said that you'll require new perspectives and new areas of expertise and a transformation in thinking behavior. And that was very similar to frontline managers. So their executive level, very similar to frontline managers. So my question for you is, where are you acquiring new perspectives and new areas of expertise? Where are you acquiring or exposing yourself to transformation in thinking behavior? One of our clients, she travels a lot, and she gave me a very simple way that she does this, by the way, is whenever she travels, she goes to the bookstore, and she'll pick up in the magazine section, the bottom right or the top right magazine. And what she does is she's continually exposing herself to a variety of ideas, a variety of input sources, versus you have to be very careful. I find that even myself in reading blogs and magazines of it becoming too narrow. That example, if you're a finance person, you're only reading Fortune and Business Week and things around finance. What about reading Architectural Digest or the Rolling Stone magazine? Or I often find some of my ideas come from, and some of my thoughts come from, completely disparate ideas, from different sources. And I think you have to be very careful, even within industries, people kind of go to the same sources. And if you look at a lot of the work around research and creativity, often comes from, finding areas in different areas. So what are you doing about that? Question number 3, what manager and leader competencies and behaviors are viewed as having the most influence on individual and organization performance? So number 1 is 75% of respondents said that communication is critical to both individual and organization success. How many of you would say that communication is a challenge in your organization? Put up your hands, those of you that would say that that information or communication is a challenge in your organization. Okay, so about 30%. How many of you would say that your organization is highly effective at communicating? That your organization in general, you would say, is a very effective or at communicating. So it's about 15%, so about half of that. So the next area is execution. So next competencies are execution. How many of you, put up your hands, would say the organization is very effective at execution? That would be something you look at your organization in general and say, yeah, we are very, very strong in execution. Oh, interesting. A very small amount. Um, Smaller amount. Okay, 19, running around 20%. How many of you would say execution is a weak point in your organization? You would say the execution is a weak point. Oh, interesting. Much higher. 30%. So it's a weak point, or 30 higher than that. Almost 40%. Interesting. Execution being very weak. Interesting. Okay. And decision making. Decision making is the next criteria. How many of you would say the organization has very strong decision making? And I would say that relates to execution, right? And I would suggest that a low execution organization has low decision making ability. That would be interrelated. And then the next piece is coaching, mentoring, and people development is the next piece. And it's interesting how they're all around very similar numbers, between the 60 to 75 range. How many of you would say that coaching, mentoring, people development is a high priority in your organization currently, that your organization spends a lot of the resources on people development? Okay, good. I mean, and by the way, if your organization is looking for something, I'll put a bit of a plug for what we do, that we do a lot of work in that area. And in fact, if you look at the research, high-performing organizations spend a lot of time and money on investing in coaching and workshops. So we do both coaching and workshops, so that's good. So yeah, so what's interesting though is I found was interesting is that one of the lowest competencies was humility and courage. And I mentioned the book earlier, Good to Great. And one of the things that struck me in the book when I read it was one of the commonalities of great leaders was their humility and their courage. And I think in today's environment, we need courageous leaders. In fact, we need them. They're not. We don't want them. We need them. It's going to be it's not going to be easy to lead a RIM or a Google or an Apple or a running room or any if you're not courageous. Really need courageous leaders. So this is interesting looking at this. Next piece is what are the current perceptions of manager and leader capacities as related to challenges. And what the perceptions are that there's improvement required across all leadership competencies and all leadership behaviors. And the largest gaps were found in the following area: communication, coaching, and knowledge transfer, and accountability, and engaging their full creative potential of employees. So it's interesting, it didn't talk about money or strategy. It was more related to how do you engage people? How do you hold people accountable? What's interesting, I think, one of the best things you can do is work for somebody who has a high accountability factor. They're not easy to work for, but I can guarantee you'll find there lots of good things happening with somebody who's like that. So what are as for the type of learning experiences that would help lead impact performance? So the learning experiences that people look for, both senior and frontline manager, were reframing or reshaping underlying patterns and embracing the unknown to create and integrate new realities. Again, if you look at this, if you look at even thing like the Dyson vacuum, embracing the unknown and integrate new realities. And this is where coaching and things like that can be very effective in helping with reshaping and dealing with underlying patterns there. High-performing organizations, what do they have in common? They consider technology to be number one future challenge. They place higher emphasis on enabling work-life balance or integration, and they play higher importance on coaching, mentoring, people development. Low-performing organization effectively, are not doing the top three. So this is where leadership. If I think about this example, the high-performing taxi driver used technology. He was in charge of his schedule, looking at scheduling. He placed more emphasis on communicating with me and on a strategy of communication and on asking good questions. The low-performing taxi driver did not. He relied on luck, circumstances, low use of any of the elements he had in his control. He did not take advantage of them. Interesting enough, he was the younger of the two. So he was in his 20s. The other gentleman was in his early 50s. And so it's interesting how that it's not your age, but it's your mindset that can influence that. So what are some tips to think about? How do I deal with this? Well, one, start with what you know. You know a lot more than often either you're giving credit for or you give yourself credit for. Your best decision-making tool you have is your gut, your intuition, your wisdom. Your smartest hiring decision is your gut, your intuition, your experience. Don't forget that. Number two, think about how to look at global things and how to drink locally. What do I mean by that? We have an office in Calgary, and I saw this going through the airport, and it's this idea of looking at the big picture but figuring out what to do, how to apply this locally. What are the local opportunities? What are the way I can execute this? How do I get global experience, as I mentioned earlier, and how do I apply that locally? Another principle is another taxi principle is, I mentioned earlier about your own leadership style. Um, what's interesting is looking at the first taxi car here. Here is somebody that's willing to stand out from the crowd, to be different, to differentiate themselves, to have a unique perspective, to be willing to stand apart. And I think the danger we have in whether it's the taxi business of homogenization or in an organization is this homogenized personalities and everyone looking the same, dressing the same, speaking the same. In fact, there's a great book called Death Sentences, and that's this whole theory is that organizations die because of the way that they communicate and literally. And so to me, knowing your style, being true to that style, standing out and being willing to do that. How many of you were part of Scouts or Cubs or Brownies growing up? Put up your hands, those of you that were part of that organization growing up. What I learned from them, in fact, they're one of our corporate clients, as I mentioned earlier, what I learned from them is this concept of being prepared. Being prepared, and that may be in getting certified, maybe in going back to school and doing some certification. It may be in volunteering for different opportunities within your organization. Be prepared, and what preparation can do is help you to access and identify new opportunity. The other thing is, a great way to develop leadership style is to get involved. So be a leader, be a scouting leader, a cub leader, a brownie leader, get involved in your faith community, get involved in an association. There's tremendous opportunities for you to practice and develop your leadership style in all kinds of for-profit, not-for-profit organizations. And that can be tremendous learning opportunities. That's another important principle. Another important principle is a good manager is a mirror. Somebody who's willing to sort of show you who you really are. I remember working for somebody, and once, he shared with me, something I didn't like hearing at the time. But I'm so thankful that he had the courage to say, Alan, this is who you are. And he was both reflective in who he was, but also was willing to share that with me. I think another good manager is like this farmer. They see opportunity where they are. And I call it the wind Haida hydro principle. Some farmers are getting off the farm because of different reasons, and this farmer saw opportunity where he was and where they were as a family. And I think a good leader sees that, which way the wind is blowing, how to take advantage of opportunity. Another leader, another thing that leaders are really good at, smart leaders, is helping others to do what they love and loving what you do. And it's very interesting. If you look at Spencer Stuart, one of the largest executive search firms on the planet, did research on executives that had extraordinary careers. And one of the things they determined is those that enjoyed what they did were 6 times more successful than their peers. It's funny. I just got off a conference call with a person who is fairly senior in a manufacturing company in taxation. He doesn't like it at all. So what is the chances of that person going on to be head of taxation within his sector? Probably not that high because he doesn't have the interest, right? So looking for something you're interested in. I mentioned execution earlier. You talked about that in research, and it's very interesting. Sir Ranulph Fiennes talked about this. He went on to find one of the largest and most important archaeological expeditions in the 20th century, and one of the ways he found it was he stopped looking and he started digging. And within sort of making that decision, within 24 hours, he realized they'd spent way too much time looking and they hadn't spent enough time digging. And he just made that decision. Tomorrow we're going to start digging, and we've got to dig at once. And they found one of the largest finds. Another important element is optimism. Um, rigorously protecting and nurturing optimism is really important as a leader. One of the most important things you can do. One of the things I admire, by the way, with the new CEO of RIM, is if you listen to him and you listen to a smart coach, they'll be honest, but they'll always have a tone of optimism. And if you listen to a weak leader or a poor leader, they'll be honest, but there's always a tone of pessimism underneath that. And so to me, one of the things you have to work rigorously on is to be honest, but to be optimistic. In fact, you want to live longer, you want to have better relationships, you want to make more money. Be an optimist. If you don't want to live longer, don't want to have better relationships, you want to have poorer health, poorer bank account, more stress in your life. Be a pessimist, but also don't just be an optimist. Be an opportunist. Which is what I saw when I was in Shoppers Drug Mart when I noticed that they were selling the pregnancy test in the condom aisle. That's an opportunist market. Another important thing is being networks. I think smart leaders are incredibly well networked because to get things done in organizations, you're not going to get it done by yourself. It's funny, we're joking about this. I've been away and we're watching TV. I don't actually have TV at home. We only have Netflix and well, that's changing because Netflix has so much. But one of the interesting things on the Pawn Star program is they always have a network of people they can draw on to evaluate anything, any um, any item they're not sure about. They have a friend and somebody in their network they can go and rely and ask them on. And whether you're a Pawn Star or whether you're in whatever you're doing, your network is important, and the more diverse it is, the more networked you are across can make a huge difference, especially internally in the organization. I find most people are too vertically networked, so they might be in IT and all their networks in IT or all their networks in finance. The people that tend to do better in organizations have cross networks. Also, they're networked in their alumni. This is why being part of the York alumni is important, because you have a tremendous access with your alumni. Getting out to events, getting involved in your alumni is another key. Another important thing to think is, as I talk about networks, is also don't forget about your digital brand. This is where Twitter and social media and Facebook and Google and LinkedIn are tremendous ways to think about your network. And always remember analog. Don't think digital, think analog. I think too many people think digitally and don't think enough analog. And analog is about real relationships with real people. Um, I think another important principle that managers and leaders know is when is enough and when's enough, whether it's working at home, vacation, whatever it might be. And that's another thing I would suggest that healthy leaders have is they've got diverse interests. They've got time and space in their life for other things that are important to them. And I think I've seen that. What other interests do you have in your life? To be an interesting person, to get diverse and new perspectives in life, you got to go to places that are not work related. I happen to love, I love documentaries and I love the water. So I spend a lot of time in the water, and in the winter I ski and cross country ski, and I love documentaries and books. So to me, having space and time to do those things not only makes you a more effective leader, but it makes you a far more interesting person. And again, people work for people and not. I think another thing is it's never too late and never too early. I think it's never too late to kind of learn something new as a leader, and it's never too early to change something. I think another thing you want to think about is just taking steps. So the leaders just take, step by step. I think great leaders are very respectful. I think another thing I find about leaders is funny. So we have offices across the country from Halifax to Vancouver. We have 10 offices, but I personally work out of our Ottawa office and out of Toronto. And in my Toronto Ottawa office, there's a little cafe beside our office, and this is on the checklist. And I thought, it's this huge welcoming smile, enthusiastic hello, and a genuine thank you with eye contact. They have that. I'm not sure why they have that, by the way, in the back of their where I pick, where the customer picks up things. I'm not sure why it isn't facing them. But anyways, I think it's a pretty good recipe for being a lead leader. When you're walking in the morning, what are you like? In fact, there's this really cool blog you might want to check out. It's called goodmorning.org, I think. And it's just this blog of a 2-second video of I think it's goodmorning.org, of people saying good morning, and it's really going viral. And it's just so this is Yeah, somebody asked a question about, balance versus the 24/7, which is a great question. So I think what I mean by that is you have to learn how to navigate. So what do I mean by that? See, I don't work 9 to 5. I work. Well, I'll give you an example. When I was in Victoria, I was at that conference I was speaking about. I was speaking at night, and was on East Coast time. So here I am on East Coast time. I've got West Coast clients, East Coast clients, and speaking at a conference. So how did I do that? Well, in the afternoon, from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, I turned off my laptop and my cell phone, and I went paddleboarding for 2 hours. And I didn't feel guilty about it because I had started that morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. I at night was doing my speech, in front of 350 people or whatever it was, and I was going to have a very full day. And then after my dinner, or my speech, I left early from the dinner and I went and had dinner with friends. So that was the way for me of within this environment where I'm being pulled for 13 different directions, which is not unusual. You're not unusual than I am. But within that, I decided I'm going to have some measure of control, and I'm not going to be on all the time, and I'm going to give myself space and time to go paddleboarding in Victoria, because I love paddleboarding and I love Victoria. So that was to me of relating this concept of the navigation of time, and less thinking linearly and thinking more non-linearly. I don't know if that's helpful to think about that. Somebody asked that question. It's a good question. I think another important thing to think about as a leader is give them what you want, not what you think you want. They want, rather. And what's interesting is my niece, she's feeding her dog water. The problem is Lily spent the whole day in the water, not that interested in water. And again, be very careful of that as a leader, to give people what, and give without being manipulative, find out what they're interested in, and give them that first. And then you can start talking about what you're interested in after that. I mentioned communication earlier. Tim Horton says, understand this is not the small, medium, and large. There's a like it, love it, and gotta have it size, right? So that's a great example of communication. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to open this up for questions in a minute. So how many of you, put up your hands, think that there is a car wash on this piece of property right now? Put up your hands. How many of you that think there is currently a car wash on this piece of property? How many people think there's a car wash? Just put up your hands. Well, okay, 30. We're up to about 30%, 29%. How many of you think there is not a car wash on this piece of property? Put up your hands. How many of you think there is not a car wash? All right. And I'd like you to put in the questions section. Why do you think there's not a car wash on this piece of property? What would be your potential clue that there may not be a car wash on this property? Maybe. Exactly. I did not Photoshop this sign. Okay. Who would like to work for this leader? We have all worked for many people who have said they're coming soon, maybe going to whatever, or maybe coming soon, organization maybe going to do this, or coming soon, but they're not committed, right? Correct. There actually is a for sale sign on this piece of property right now. That sign, by the way, stood there for a year and a half on that piece of property. That is not commitment. And I think, again, as I said to you, commitment starts with you. What are you committed to? And I love what Terry O'Reilly has to say about this. It's not with a bang, not with a whimper, but our own skilled hands. Our commitment to our own skilled hands will determine our quality of our leadership, and our quality of leadership over ourselves will determine our quality of life. The more discipline you have in a healthy way, and not obsessive, the greater your focus on managing and taking ownership over the things you have control over and being committed to that, whatever that is, whether for profit, not for profit, whatever it might be, the higher your quality. And that to me is the ultimate thing. When I think about our two taxi drivers, who do you think has a higher quality of life? This guy that's hopefully relying on potentially things happening, or Mr. Land, who is controlling the things he has. And he's very committed to what he does and is committed to excellence within that. And and as a result of that, is maximizing his career potential. Not only that, by the way, he told me he put his 3 kids through university, driving a taxi drive. Okay, so there you go. So as we move to question and Q&A here, what is one takeaway from today that you are going to implement? What is one fresh, healthy takeaway that you think, you know what, Alan? this will be helpful for me. Because again, if this is just a coming soon maybe conversation we've had tonight, then maybe it's been inspiring, maybe it's not been inspiring, maybe you just stayed here because of guilt, who knows. But to me, what is your personal commitment to you? What is one takeaway from you that you want to start working on and you're going to be committed to? Again, not for my sake, but for your own sake. And would you mind sharing that in the questions box here, just to kind of get an idea of some of the things that you're thinking is one? Because again, if you don't commit to something, then you've just maybe learned some things, but again, I'm not so sure you're going to get the value out of what we're talking about, right? So it's um, and I'm going to share some of those. And what I love about this commitment idea is, the places you'll go. I was just actually in a gallery yesterday with some of Dr. Seuss's stuff, and just unbelievable. Some of the other stuff I haven't seen, that's gallery items, and all the places you'll go if you make commitments. So what are some of the things you talked about? I love this. So the 10-minute rule day, I love that's one takeaway, which is great. Gain. Uh, so we talked about gain here, of what will gain. Optimism, optimism is. I think optimism, it gets a bad rap because there's this whole concept of false optimism and say it and believe it type of thing. And I always say I'm a pragmatic optimist, and better. Nick, he talks about the say of asking why. Um, Another person talked about seeking experience outside of my usual training. Yeah, I always amaze. I always think, if you were to put a little GPS on all of us, we'd be amazed how full of routine we are. Although I'm sort of accused of not. Optimism with honesty, to practice it and start with why. Excellent. Yeah, optimism and honesty. That's great, Clara. I love that, because again, there's no point being false. But it's being optimistic, but being honest, and that's good. Start with what I know and be confident that I actually know more than I think. That is so true. If you look at the root word of, it's funny, I'm speaking on Friday. I'm speaking to the guidance counselors of Ontario. They're having a conference here in Toronto, and one of the things that I'm going to be sharing actually is the root word of etymology. Sorry, the etymology, the root of etymology is the same thing. The etymology of education means to draw out. Educate, to draw out, actually. It does not mean to fill in. And I think we are full of wisdom ourselves. Claudette talked about this, reinforce what I started. I'm already preparing for a job that might come up in the future, and I've already taken courses. Excellent. So that's the be prepared principle. Another person here talked about reading things outside of my immediate interests. Yeah, that's great. Another person talked about positive energy, which is true. That we don't want to hang out. We'll avoid people that are negative and critical and stifling. So great, that's excellent. Some really, really great comments tonight. I'm really glad. So I'm going to open this up for questions. A couple of things before we go into Q&A period is how can we help you? Well, we have a number of one-on-one programs to help you either in leadership. So if you're looking for some leadership support, we have a specific program called the Leadership Identity Program where we can work one-on-one with you. I'm not sure what your organization does. Some people will have a training development, personal development budget, so you can take that out to us. We do a lot of our clients come to us with their personal development or training development budget, and we have a number of different programs we can work with you. Or you might encourage us, or if you want to connect us, our team, our business development team, with your organizational development group or your talent development group. We can talk to them about the different ways we can help your organization. Or some of you might be individually looking for investments. I would say people invest $50,000 to $100,000 in an MBA, don't even think about it. So, so this is. We also have different programs in career job search, or if you're trying to figure out what the right career is, or career transition, or student program, and professional resume service. So we have a wide range of programs working across the country. And you can also sit down with one of our coaches for a checkup. So just a 45-minute checkup to kind of get a sensibility of where you're at right now and what your needs are. And, just like you would going to see your dentist or your doctor. So that's another way we can help you. So I'm going to open this up for questions tonight. Any questions you have? I know it's a little bit late for many of you who are in East Coast, or depending where you're calling from. So But I'm going to stay on the line for the webinar for questions. And again, a couple of other things I mentioned as we think about this. I'll just bring that up. If you are on Facebook, then just take a minute to like our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page on like our Facebook page, and as well as on LinkedIn. Feel free, as I mentioned, to connect with me on LinkedIn, and there's my profile, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as on our website. We have a number of different tools you can generate and download from on our website. So feel free to take advantage of lots of things. I also have a blog on there, so you'll find my blog. I'm writing every Friday, by the way. We put up there a Friday leadership report where I put together and curate some really good articles around leadership that you might want to take advantage of that. That's on Fridays. So great. So I'll stay on the line for some specific questions or comments. And if you know just a couple of things, if you found this helpful tonight, then like our Facebook page or connect with us. And if you know others that are struggling with this question, then feel free to reach out to us or point them to our website. And there's tons of tools on there that may be helpful. So I did the last Friday leadership report was on bad leadership. So great. Specific questions or comments? One of the questions was where are we located? Well, we have 10 offices across the country. So we have Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, Halifax, and 3 in Toronto. Toronto downtown, Toronto Yonge and Sheppard, and Mississauga. What sectors do we work in? So we work in a variety of sectors. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of clients in different sectors, from healthcare to finance to manufacturing to taxation, a wide range of things. And so if you look at our team does a variety of things. Somebody asks, what does our initial consultation include? The $99 is really a 45-minute session to sort of sit down with your situation. We have a mini assessment we have you do before, just to think about your situation, and it's a way of sort of thinking about where you're at and getting some perspective about where you're at and what's going on in your career, and giving some guidance around that situation. Other question. Do you work with school administrators? Actually, we do. Yeah, we work with a number of people in the public sector. In fact, work with different principals and vice principals. We've actually done some work with school boards. So, absolutely, we worked interesting enough in cross sectors. And again, it's a great example. This whole concept of leadership is everywhere. So yeah, we've done a lot of work in the administrative side also with teachers too. We've done a lot of work with teachers. So. Another question: how do you go about matching someone with the right coach? Great question. Well, really, what I look for, and it's a big part of my job actually, is the matching part. Is part of it is it's art and science, is getting a sensibility of the person and their background, and our coach. And so we have a wide range in our team. And the neat thing about our model is that if it is not a fit, we can switch to another coach, and we just start you right all over. We don't, we assume you hadn't even started the program and bring it back to ground zero. So we've had that situation from time to time where it's just not a fit, and we just start you with a different coach, and away you go again. So that's what we're fortunate that we've got, a great team. Great. Well, I know we're running right on the hour, and I'm more than willing to stand around for any other questions. Also, I mentioned earlier, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or to send me a question if you want to email me a question, alan@careerjoy.com. I'm happy to do that. Do we have coaches with specialization in psychology and other social science? Yeah, we do actually. We have I guess a couple in our team that have a specialization in that. We have different, like I said, we have different coaches with different areas of sub-specialization and sub-experiences. So yeah, absolutely. Terrific. Okay. So I think that's good. So thank you very much, everyone. As I mentioned, if we can help you at all, or people are looking for support in their transition, then feel free to connect them with our team. We're happy to help you. And yeah, as I mentioned, leadership starts with you. As you think about where you want to go and what you want to do next and what your options are, just work through this process and think about the opportunities that are out there, and think about that little mantra of do you want to be the lucky taxi driver, or do you want to be the leading taxi driver? And the difference is not much, but it's everything in many ways. So terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your great questions and comments, and for the participation and your likes and all your comments. So thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.